Welcome back. This is a little show we call the Cold War with Cam and Ray. I'm
Yeah, it is.
Cam. He's Ray. How are you, Ray?
Fine. How are you, Cam?
I'm good, Ray. Sad. We're
Sad.
talking off air. David Lynch, one of the greatest directors,
Mhm.
slash painters, slash musicians, slash just creative geniuses the
Renaissance man,
United
really.
States has ever produced. Sadly, passed away today, 78 years old. I discovered Lynch in my late teens, early 20s when I started getting into film, and he has been in my pantheon of creative gods ever since. And funnily enough, just this last week, I've been doing a deep dive. I was in a library on the weekend and grabbed a book on Lynch, started reading it, and just ended up downloading a couple of books on Lynch's films. I've read books by Lynch about Lynch over the decades, but I hadn't read one for a couple of years. Was going deep on the films and thinking, yeah, it's time for another major retrospective. I did watch the Twin Peaks reboot again not too long ago, and Twin
Hmm.
Peaks the original. But and then to wake up this morning and find out that he had passed away was shocking, not unexpected because we knew he had really bad emphysema. He
Right.
announced that not long ago. And I think the LA fires, I know he had to move out of his house at some point during the fires. And there's some suggestions on the Reddits this morning that the smoke and the particulate matter might have exacerbated his emphysema.
Yeah.
But the thing that I've been thinking of, the irony, been thinking about this the last week, is fire plays such a huge role in all of his work, his film and
Oh,
TV work. Twin
right.
Peaks, Fire, Walk with Me. There's a lot of fire imagery and Wild at Heart and lots of his films.
Mm.
Mulholland Drive. And I was wondering, oh, what he thinks of the LA fires. Like, does he sort of go, wow, this is amazing? But
Right.
anyway, we will never
Well,
we will never know.
right. We will never know. Yeah.
Well, back into the Cold War. So last time on the show, Ray, we're talking about the Cuban Revolution for people that are just joining us.
Right.
We're doing episode 278 of the Cold War today. But it's part 3 of the Cuban Revolution. And, we're starting it where it needs to be started. The original Cuban revolutions of the late 19th century when the Cubans were fighting the Spaniards. In our
Oh,
last
yeah.
episode, we were talking about one of Cuba's greatest heroes, Jose Marti. Castro referred to him as the intellectual author of the Cuban Revolution. He
Mm.
fought to free Cuba from Spain, but he was also very concerned about the ambitions of the United States. He lived in New York for, can't remember now, like years and years and years when he was
Right.
in exile from Cuba. Um, we talked about the creation of yellow journalism in the last episode in the late 19th century in the United States, where they were beating the drums for America to go to war. And I think we're going to pick this episode up in January of 1898. The Cubans were on the verge of victory
Yes.
in their
Oh,
battle for independence against Spain.
yes.
They had been fighting a series of revolutionary wars over sort of 15 odd years. And this last one, even though a couple of their leaders, including Jose Marti, are dead, they've really got their act together and they're really inflicting a lot of pain on the Spanish. And the US government is keeping an eye on this. And whilst they're happy to see Spain out of the picture, it
Yeah.
seems they had really no intention of allowing Cuba to be independent. What's wrong with your country, Ray? Why didn't they want an independent Cuba?
Wow. It's not so much want, but low-hanging fruit. I mean, it's right there. There, the people, and we stressed this on the last episode. The locals, the Cubans, have been fighting for over 30 years, so this has been a long time coming. But the point is, yeah, this It's right there. But it's interesting because when I was doing the research for this, and you asked the question that you asked, why did America not want this? I was a little surprised by the answer because in a lot of things, moments in history, this is kind of repeated itself. America got involved. We wanted to be involved in this fight, kind of almost for selfish reasons, but not the obvious ones that you think. Because if the Americans fight Spain over Cuba, in a way that might help heal our wounds. What wounds? Well, the U.S. Civil War ended only 33 years ago. We had the horrible period that was called the Reconstruction era, and the idea was if we can get if we can get American soldiers kind of from all over the world, all over the country to fight together, maybe that will help heal our wounds. I know that to me that sounds kind of ridiculous, but here's a foreign threat. Here's a foreign war. And if we can all get together, stop bitching at each other and fight them, maybe that will help bring us together. We can kill some Spaniards, sing Kumbaya, and maybe liberate an island. The great irony is the Confederate soldiers who once fought for slavery are now fighting for freedom. But there's a caveat. They're fighting for Cuban freedom. So again, there was hope that there would be some healing through this gutting Spaniards.
Unity. The United States. Nothing says unity more than killing foreigners. So one thing that Americans can all agree on.
It is our go-to.
Killing foreigners. Yeah, look, since the days of Jefferson back in the 1790s, almost every presidential administration in Washington had imagined that one day Cuba would be U.S. territory. They were just waiting for the right time when they figured Spain was weak enough that they could take it. And as we mentioned in the last episode, February 1898, the U.S. battleship, the Maine, exploded in Havana Harbor, killing at least 260 U.S. soldiers. And to this day, Spaniards and Cubans tend to believe that the United States planned the explosion as a pretext for declaring war on Spain. I don't know what the mainstream view in the United States is today. I think the last we read about it, we said people are still divided about it. They don't know how or why it happened. Was it Cubans? Was it Spaniards? Was it an accident? But for whatever reason, of course, they blamed Spain at the time. And it really did help create this sense of outrage. Americans love being outraged today more than ever.
Yeah. Well, I've always wanted to talk about that. We can do this later, but between World War II and the Cold War, I really do feel that America is lost unless we have an enemy. Whereas some countries, a lot of Europe, can just be, they can just exist and they live life. I think America needs to either pit itself against something or someone or mark itself. I don't know. I just think it's a part of our national whatever by now, just because of the decades-long Cold War. But again, I think that's just who we are as a nation, which is a very sad fact. But you have to acknowledge it first before you can work on it. But I've always felt that. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, look, I can't speak for other countries, but I think here in Australia we don't get outraged a lot. We're like, okay.
You're too busy at the beach. Sorry.
Yeah, we're at the beach. We're fishing. We're playing cricket in thongs, fighting off spiders and shit. We're like,
we got enough problems. We don't need. Yeah.
We get outraged for like a minute. We go, oh, that's horrible. Okay, I guess it's time for a beer. All right, let's go.
Yeah, exactly. Where were we?
But the newly elected president at the time of the United States, Billy McKinley.
Yeah.
He thought, listen, war schmore. How about we just buy it?
Yeah.
We'll just try and buy it off of Spain.
Yeah.
He made an offer about a month after the sinking of the USS Maine. He made an offer to Spain to purchase Cuba, a bit like your soon-to-be President Trump in a couple of days, offering to or suggesting that he's going to buy Greenland, which, by the way,
Yeah.
I've seen a lot of stuff in the news about, oh, Trump's crazy, wants to buy Greenland. As our resident fake historian, I just want to point out to people that the United States have been talking about buying Greenland also for a couple of hundred years. This isn't a new idea that Trump got out of his cornflakes packet.
Exactly.
They've been trying to buy Greenland from Denmark since, as I said, since the 19th century. There were attempts and discussions about it in 1867, 1910, 1946, 1955, and then most recently, 2019. People like Secretary of State William Seward and our old friend Jimmy Burns considered trying to buy it, as did Vice President Nelson Rockefeller. He just wanted to buy it as a holiday host.
That's right, yeah.
Country estate, really. But, it's probably what Trump wants to do with it too.
Exactly.
But Greenland is an autonomous territory of the Kingdom of Denmark.
Yes.
And they both the Greenlanders and the Danish authorities have said that Greenland has a right to self-determination, so it technically isn't for sale. But we know that the US doesn't really care about self-determination outside of the US so much.
It's not big.
So
it's not big here for other people.
Yeah.
For other people.
For other people. Yeah. And they certainly didn't care about it in Cuba's case then or really now. So McKinley thought he'd give Spain a way out of the humiliation of defeat in a war.
Exactly.
Either defeat by the Cuban rebels or defeat by the United States. But Spain, not so ready to give up, Ray.
Yeah. Well, I see that's the thing. So he says, McKinley says to Spain, like you said, let us buy this from you. It's the best of a bad situation. Spain says no. But McKinley says, okay, well, at the very least, you will stop forcing the locals into these relocation centers where we talked about last time. Thousands, if not tens of thousands of them were dying. Spain goes, okay, we won't sell it to you, but we will start negotiations with the rebels. How's that? McKinley's like, I can live with that. But the rebels themselves said, you can take that and fuck all the way off. So Spain says no to the sale. The rebels say no to negotiations. Well, what the hell are you supposed to do then? But the point is, the rebels, like you said earlier, the rebels are, after 30 years, they're close to winning. They're about to win. Why in the fuck would you start talking now? So McKinley tried, but both sides are not willing to play ball. So now it's time for something else.
Yeah. The Cubans are like, we've shed blood over this.
Exactly.
We're very close to victory. Why the fuck would we have a peace treaty when we can win this thing? It's all over bar the shouting, really.
Exactly.
And you know what this reminds me of is the US and Japan in August 1945. Japan's on the verge of surrender. The Soviets are about to not re-sign their non-aggression pact with Japan. They're about to enter the war with Japan. Everybody knows that as soon as the Soviets enter the war with Japan, Japan's going to fold. They're not going to be able to fight two fronts. And to prevent that from happening and possibly having to share Japan with the Soviet Union, like they had to share Germany with the Soviet Union, the Americans nuke Japan and get on top of the situation.
And not one thing.
Similar situation here. They can see that victory is at hand. Oh, it also reminds me of Pompey the Great. You know, that little fracas with the slaves, Spartacus, and those guys.
Yeah.
Look, I know it's nearly done. I know it's nearly over, but
you know, let me tie a bow on it. Come on. I got a bow right here.
Take credit for it. Yeah.
Yeah. The last man standing.
Yeah. Whoa, hold on. Wait. What do you mean that he defeated the slaves? I was the last guy there. Well, yeah, well, they were already pretty much defeated.
Oh,
I didn't see any signature on the dotted line. I'm the guy that got the signature on the dotted line. Going to take the credit for it. Thank you very much.
Again, you're
Do you mind
welcome.
if I call myself the Great?
The Great.
Actually, we know Sulla called him the Great, didn't he? Facetiously.
Yes.
You're so great. And
Yeah.
Poppy was like, really? Oh, I'll take that. He goes, no, it wasn't meant as I'll take it. Sulla's like, what? No, really.
My favorite
Sulla's like,
part.
fuck it.
My favorite
anyway.
part. I'm sorry. My favorite part between those two, real quick, just very funny, is when they met. Pompey was telling Sulla all about the elephants in Africa, and Sulla's like, "Really? No? Oh my God! You don't say." Sulla cut his teeth working with Marius in North Africa against the Jugurtha. So he's like, "You don't know shit about anything, but hey, if you want to blow hard, you go right ahead. I need you in your army right now, so tell me more. I'm so fascinated." I mean, just.
Sulla was actually riding an elephant at the time, and Pompey was telling him about them. It's like, really, you don't say.
This is my mule.
What's
my
the
very
Disney
big mule.
elephant that flies with the flappy ears?
Dumbo.
Dumbo. Yeah, he's like, have you met Dumbo? Yes, yeah, you got a big horse. Yeah.
With horns. Thank you.
Tusks, right? Tusks.
There we go.
Tusks.
A horn would be a unicorn, but that's a whole different.
Dun 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 dun. Don't tell me that you want me. Dun dun. Anyway, Fleetwood Mac. There for the kids. Back in the old days, we would have played that, but now they won't let us. The bastards.
Mm-hmm.
So on the 11th of April, 1898, McKinley requested authority from Congress to declare war on Spain.
Right.
Now, it's interesting when you read some of the stuff from around that time. And I did spend a lot of time this week going back through newspapers from this era, reading a lot of the commentary, not only from the United States, but from around the world on the situation here. And as I said before, like presidents have wanted to get their hands on Cuba for a long time at this point.
Yeah.
Obviously, they had a lot of business interests, a lot of investment in Cuba, a lot of agricultural interests that they had a big stake in Cuba, and those had been affected directly by the war. A lot of crops destroyed, infrastructure destroyed, trade basically shut down.
Right.
But there was one senator from Colorado, Henry Teller, who later became a magician. And
with his brother, Penn.
Penn's not his brother. They're not brothers.
Penn and Teller,
they're brothers. They're not brothers.
Not brothers. They're brothers in the sense of
from another mother, like us.
Yeah. Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
He introduced an article known as the Teller Amendment, which said that the United States disavowed any intention to exercise sovereignty, jurisdiction, or control over Cuba, except for the pacification thereof.
Oh, yeah. We're the good guys.
It also said that when the pacification was accomplished, the United States would leave the government and control of the island to its people.
Very noble.
Now, yeah, very noble. Lovely piece of writing. The fact that he had his fingers crossed and they're all snickering when they said that, no one picked up on. So on April 20th, 1898, the US declared war on Spain. And I've got a bit of a speech that he gave. I've got segments of the speech that the president gave when they declared war.
Nice.
In the name of humanity. That's always a great start to a speech. Whenever I give speeches, I've done this all my life. I start with,
right?
Yeah, in the name of humanity, let me say this. What the fuck? Seriously.
Because you just raise the bar. When you start with like that, you just raise the fucking bar. Yeah. Sorry.
It's not just my opinion. It's not the opinion of my family or my city, my state, my country. I'm speaking here on behalf of all humanity. Let me
Yes.
just start by saying that
Yeah.
by the grace of God, I am
Exactly.
hereby speaking in the name of humanity.
Hmm.
Therefore, if you disagree with me,
You're
you're
against.
inhuman. Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly.
Don't you love
We.
humanity? Then you must agree with me.
Exactly.
In the name of humanity, in the name of civilization, and in behalf of endangered American interests, which give us the right and the duty to speak and act, the war in Cuba must stop. Well, so right there, he's putting it out
Yeah.
there. Like we
Yeah.
say these days that Trump says the quiet part out loud. Back in those
McKin.
days, they weren't worried.
Yeah.
They're like, endangered American interests give us the right and duty to speak and act.
Absolutely. Forget gallons of blood of Cuban blood. This is American interest. We have a sacred honor, if you will.
To protect our money.
Uh, Thank you.
Since the present revolution began in February 1895, this country has seen the fertile domain at our threshold ravished by fire and sword in the course of a struggle unequaled in the history of the island and rarely paralleled as to the number of combatants and the bitterness of the contest by any revolution of modern times. Where a dependent people striving to be free have been opposed by the power of the sovereign state. Our people have beheld a once prosperous community reduced to comparative want. Now, were they prosperous? I think the whole point of the revolution was they weren't prosperous,
Yeah.
generally speaking.
Somebody else was, if you will, from all their hard labor.
Yeah. Its lucrative commerce virtually paralyzed, its exceptional productiveness diminished. Productiveness. Why did I struggle to say that word? Its exceptional productiveness. I'm sure you'll edit that out. Its fields laid waste, its mills in ruins, and its people perishing by tens of thousands from hunger and destitution. Is he talking about Gaza? No. Okay. Because
No.
no, Mrs. McKinley, not Biden. Sorry, I
No.
forgot. We have found
Exactly.
ourselves constrained in the observance of that strict neutrality which our laws enjoin and which the law of nations commands to police our own waters and watch our own seaports in prevention of any unlawful net in aid of the Cubans. Our trade has suffered. The capital invested by our citizens in Cuba has been largely lost, and the temper and forbearance of our people have been so severely tried as to beget a perilous unrest among our own citizens. So, to sum it up, we're losing money, and we don't want the Cubans to get independence, so we need to get in and take control of the situation.
Exactly. Get in on the ground floor of this new, supposedly about to be independent Cuba. The time is now. I think we'll all agree. And then you've got the Monroe Doctrine. You've got whatever else I can't remember. But America has the right, by golly, by gum, to interject its nose into whatever the fuck we want to. And nothing's changed. God bless America.
Yeah, the Monroe Doctrine, of course, was named after Marilyn Monroe. Never wear panties when you're walking over a subway air vent, I think.
Exactly. So now
Meanwhile,
the two countries, America. Sorry, no, you go ahead. I didn't know you weren't finished.
After you.
No, I was just going to say, and you're right. Now you said April 20th. I have April 25th, but when the U.S. and Spain declared war on each other, again, I could have been a slippage of the finger. My finger slips often. We don't need to dwell into that at all. But the point is, they are now at war with. They are now.
Yeah,
at
I'm
war
sorry,
with
it
each other.
slipped. How many times I've heard you say that, and I keep buying it.
But
oh, my finger slipped.
Yeah, thank you. As long as you keep buying it, I'm going to keep slipping it in there. The point is, everybody knows. Everybody knows, one, that Spain is pretty much almost beaten because it can't handle even not only Cuba, but other parts of its empire. And with the Americans coming in, their base of operations is Florida. This is going to be over. It's just a matter of how and when. So Yeah. Things are about to change.
And meanwhile, as McKinley suggested in his speech, the Spanish were deliberately trying to completely destroy the country's economy. We
Mm,
talked last
agree.
time about how the Spanish governor of the island invented the concentration camp
Yep.
to basically round people up. And McKinley mentioned this in his speech. He said the peasants have been driven into the garrison towns or isolated places held by the troops. The fields
Mm,
were laid waste, dwellings unroofed and fired, mills destroyed, and in short, everything that could desolate the land and render it unfit for human habitation or support was commanded by one or the other of the contending parties and executed by all the powers at their disposal. So I guess the Cubans were also torching everything, basically going Vestatio on the
yeah.
whole island, um, saying, okay,
But
well, even if you win, there's nothing to be had if you win here. But of
exactly.
course, for the Cubans who are going to have to live there after the war, the
It's going to
country's
be ugly
economy is going to be completely destroyed,
for
and
years.
they're going to have to figure out how to survive while they rebuild.
Yeah. Well, Spain was not the first and was not the last. Larger power to go, okay, yeah, no, I see the writing on the wall. We're going to lose this. But before we go, we are going to make things so deplorable for you. It is going to take years. You people will starve. You will suffer for years. So it's personal. And Spain, again, this is nothing new. And they were just wrecking everything they could before the war came to a close.
Now, one of the people who was very excited about going to war with Spain was the then Assistant Secretary of the Navy, Teddy Roosevelt.
He was giddy.
On the
Giddy.
giddy.
Giddy up.
There's a great Spark song that you should listen to called
Right.
Giddy. It's a giddy, 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 giddy in the city.
Oh, well.
Everywhere I go, people are all giddy. One of the on the day that Congress declared war on Spain, Roosevelt was asked by the U.S. Secretary of War to lead a volunteer regiment of
Yes.
frontiersmen, people that were horsemen and marksmen or
Yeah.
cowboys, as they were called,
Right.
to become a group. I think they had an official name like the First Volunteer Cavalry or something, but they're better known as the Rough Riders.
Yes. The riders who like it rough. Well, nope. Hold on. That came out wrong. That came out wrong. Sorry. I apologize.
They were also known as Wood's Weary Walkers after
Hmm.
its first commander, Colonel Leonard Wood. And his second in command was Teddy Roosevelt, later to become
Right.
president. And so his regiment, Wood got promoted to become commander of the 2nd Cavalry Brigade, and then the regiment became known as Roosevelt's Rough Riders.
Hmm.
So Wood's Weary Walkers to Roosevelt's Rough Riders, they loved their alliteration back in those days.
I like it rough and I like it weary. Go ahead. Go ahead.
And then Buffalo Bill, when he had his traveling Western show, Buffalo Bill's Wild West, and
Hmm.
Congress of Rough Riders of the World,
Wow.
he adopted the name. So Buffalo Bill was like, yeah, good enough for me.
Yeah.
Good enough for
Okay.
Teddy. Good enough for
Cash
me.
in. Cash in on that. Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
the term cowboy, Ray,
Yeah.
did you know much about the history of the term cowboy?
I do not. The only thing I remember from high school was that the time of the cowboy came after the U.S. Civil War, and it was actually a lot shorter as an overall period than what people think because of all the westerns they've probably seen or what their parents or grandparents watched. But no, I just imagine men riding horses, doing something with cows because beef's got to get places to the market. But that's the extent of my, and besides the cool belt buckles, I think we can all agree the bigger the better, but that's the extent of all I know.
I looked up the sort of the history of the term, the etymology of it, that kind of stuff.
Right?
The English word cowboy comes from vaquero, which is a Spanish word for somebody who manages cattle on a horseback,
Right.
from vaca, meaning cow
Mm.
in Spanish,
Hmm.
and which comes from the Latin word vaca. But it was first used in print, cowboy, that is, by Jonathan Swift in 1725,
Oh,
was used in
wow.
the British Isles from 1820 to 1850 to describe young boys who tended the family cows.
Hmm.
Also, cow herd, like a sheep herder, cow herder was originally one of the ways these people were described.
Right.
Then it sort of became a thing in the American West in 1849. Cow hand, cowboy, cow poke, cow
Mm.
puncher,
Right.
which has another
But
connotation in my mind, but sure.
yeah.
Um, Buckaroo, Buckaroo Banzai, great Australian film from the 80s. If you've never seen
Right.
it, check it out. Highly recommended.
Hmm.
Anyway, so it was used during the American Revolution to describe American fighters who opposed the movement for independence.
Oh.
Claudius Smith, an outlaw identified with the Loyalist cause, was called the Cowboy of the Ramapos because he would steal cattle and horses from
Oh.
colonists and give them to the British.
Bad hombre.
So,
Yeah.
in Tombstone, Arizona, which I didn't get to, my last trip to Arizona, I was in Phoenix. Tombstone
Right.
was, I think 4 or 5 hour drive away. I really
Yeah.
wanted to go to Tombstone. We just didn't get the time. Kicking
We'll
myself
meet
now that
there.
I didn't go there. Okay.
We'll meet there. It's in the middle. I
Uh,
don't know.
a cowboy in the 1880s, so not long before, 20 years before the um, Cuban Spanish American War,
Right.
um, cowboy was used pejoratively. It was people that had been implicated in crimes, cattle rustling, that kind of
Oh,
stuff.
right.
There
Yes.
was a group of cattle rustlers that were called the Cowboys, smuggling cattle, alcohol, tobacco across the Mexican border. But eventually, it sort of became, a positive thing. I think mostly
Hmm.
during probably the Cuban War, and then later on in Hollywood films depicting cowboys as you have good and bad cowboys, I guess. But I don't know.
Yeah.
I think it sort of became a
Well,
positive thing eventually.
I'm just proud to say, as an American, that we took that rough term cowboy. You throw a cowboy hat, a cigarette, some assless chaps, made it our own. So I'm just saying,
David Lee Roth used to wear those on stage in the early 80s,
exactly.
assless chaps.
That's all you need.
Um, Leonard Wood, by the way, who was an army surgeon who led the original group, ended up being the first governor of Cuba, well, the
Oh,
first American governor of Cuba.
spoilers. Right. Right.
And the Rough Riders weren't all cowboys. Came from a lot of different backgrounds, a lot of friends of Teddy's from
Right.
Harvard, park the car,
Manhattan.
Harvard,
Yes.
Harvard,
Harvard.
Um, and the majority of them were young men from New Mexico, Arizona, Oklahoma, and the so-called Indian territories,
Hmm.
none of which were actually states of the United States at
Isn't
the
that amazing?
time. They were
Yeah.
U.S. territory.
Yeah. And they
Many
were
of them
this.
were.
Sorry, you
Go
went out
ahead.
for a second. No, I was just going to say, and I didn't know this. They were called Hispanos, and many of them were descendants from Spaniards who had been here for generations. And they, as another group that we're about to talk about, were eager to prove. I don't know if you want to call it loyalty or whatever to America. They wanted to fight for Cuba. They wanted to fight for its independence. They wanted to prove themselves to the United States. And the best part of it at all, they were bilingual. Americans are not good on learning other people's languages. So if we can have these guys who literally do this for a living, they ride, they have to, I'm sure they have to hunt and shoot wolves. I don't know about Native Americans. I'm not going to touch that one. But these were tough sons of bitches, and they had their own horses, and they were bilingual. A lot of they were actually I think a lot of these made up the bulk of the Rough Riders as far as the common soldiers. So again, a good crop of fighters, and this is exactly what Teddy's looking for.
And they all boarded trains to San Antonio, to make their way to Cuba. San Antonio was the home of the Alamo, and the Remember the Alamo became Remember the Maine. So the
Yes.
catchphrase for the American troops was Remember the Maine. And
Exactly.
they were all like, don't think I ever was on the Maine. Never saw
No,
it.
no.
It accidentally blew up, but I guess that's
I
good
feel
enough for me. Good
yeah.
enough for
So
me.
so some 23-year-old in Arizona territory, not Arizona state, is supposed to be what disgruntled that the main ship in the harbor. It's a little bit of a reach, but the point is, if you can tie it to Remember the Alamo, suddenly for all those people out west, it's got a some connection. For some others, visceral. But the point is, here's the thing. Here's what I took from it. There was Remember the Alamo, and suddenly Texas is a state. Now you got Remember the Maine. Is someone trying to tell me that Cuba might, might be a state? Is there going to be a connection? Who knows? But the point is, they all meet up in San Antonio, Texas, get aboard trains. They're going to go to Florida. But first, there's another group of men who want to prove their loyalty to America, who want to show that they're willing to die and bleed for America. However, Teddy's not going to
The
be so.
homosexuals.
The homosexuals. There was the village people. There was the Indian, the construction work. I don't know. I don't know. But the point is, African Americans wanted to fight as well. In
Oh,
fact, there would be 4 regiments. We'll get into this in a second. And they did sign up and they did help. However, they did not get invitations to the Rough Riders because Teddy didn't like the color of their skin.
yeah. Yeah, they were barred from joining Teddy's Rough Riders. They served in the war anyway in large numbers. Like the 14th Amendment had only been ratified 30 years earlier.
Yeah.
And now they're signing up to fight for the country. Obviously, as you said, they wanted to prove their worth, but they were serving in some cases as volunteers in what were known as the immune regiments, so called because it was believed they were immune to tropical diseases.
Yeah.
Not true.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, because you said, 30 something years ago, some of those people were probably old enough to have been slaves at the time of the 14th Amendment. So they were slaves. They're now soldiers. They're fighting. They've been in America the whole time, but somehow magically, and this is my favorite part, because of the color of their skin, they are somehow immune from tropical diseases, even though they've never been to the tropics. There is nothing more beautiful than white, stupid racism.
It's called science, Ray. Look it up.
Sorry, I stand corrected. I apologize.
Now, they'd been granted their freedom and equality 30 years earlier, but of course, particularly for those living in the South, not really their experience. As we've talked about on this show in earlier episodes, they were disenfranchised by new legislation in the South that prevented them from voting and exercising other rights. They were subjected to segregation, to lynching, torture, all sorts of death and torture applied
Terrorism.
to them.
Yeah.
Nonetheless, they're signing up to fight for the country where they're being treated that way. And previously, they and their ancestors had been slaves. Now they're signing up to fight as part of the U.S. Army. They were known as the Buffalo Soldiers. Buffalo Soldiers.
I can't remember the
No
words.
one knows the next line. Doesn't matter.
Coming to America. I don't know. Anyway.
No, that's it. Yeah.
I don't know. Could I just say real quick before you go on? So there are going to be thousands, maybe tens of thousands of U.S. troops going to Cuba. The 4 black regiments, what that means is each regiment has 100 men, 97 men and 3 officers. So of those 97 men, they were all black. So it's 97 times 4. The 3 officers, all of them were white. So when you remember, these guys are like a blip of the American forces going down to Cuba to do the right thing, to help, get rid of Spain or whatever. But they are going to be treated so badly. We're going to get into this, but again, it's not like it's not like the U.S. force is 50% black. It's just 4 regiment. It's not even 400 men. But a lot of people are going to go insane at the idea of them joining, them being given guns, and them being able to fight for America.
Yeah, so they arrive in Florida to make their way to Cuba, and they get chased out of the saloons and stores in Florida because they still have, well, they have, not still, they have segregation.
Jim
And
Crow
then
laws. Yeah.
a group of drunken white volunteers from Ohio had the bright idea of using a 2-year-old black child as target practice.
Jesus Christ.
They grabbed him from his mother and threw him up in the air while other men tried to get their shots as close as possible to him without hitting him. So it's okay.
Yeah, we're not trying.
We're not trying to shoot him. Like if we do accidentally, then that's just an accident. But you can't blame us.
Yeah.
Like
we're trying not to. It's like knife throwing. You get the girl tied to the board, you spin the board, you throw the knives. Look, I'm not trying to hit her. I'll apologize to the family. But the point is, let me come as close as I possibly can. And this is what really got me. As they're doing this, other soldiers are having to hold back the mother because she is screaming her lungs out, trying to get her son. She's freaking out or whatever. They're holding her back. They're laughing. They're drunk. They're throwing this kid up. They're shooting at him. I mean, oh my God, could it get any worse? And so some of the black soldiers hear about this.
The man who won the game managed to skim the boy's shirt without drawing blood. So no harm, no foul. Everyone's fine.
Exactly.
The kid loved it. The kid had a great time.
He had a story to tell.
He was begging for more rounds for the rest of his life.
Jesus Christ.
So when other African American soldiers heard about this, they hunted down the white guys to punish them. It escalated. At least 27 black soldiers and 3 white ones were seriously wounded in the aftermath. Local reports said the streets of Tampa ran red with Negro blood.
Damn. A little bit of an exaggeration, but still. I mean, again, we're talking less than 400 men, but see what it is, and we don't really have to go into this, but before the black soldiers arrived, the Cuban Americans, and most of them worked on cigar production, which to me makes them the real heroes. The point is, because they're Cuban and not Africans or not solely Africans or whatever, they were able to avoid a lot of the Jim Crow laws. And so there was a delicate balance in this town in Florida. And of course, when the black soldiers show up, that delicate balance is ruined. You've got all this. And when this happened, when the big melee happened, it was literally the night before they were going to leave. So they almost made it, but the drunk white soldiers ruined it, as they always do. And so you had this horrible thing, which I'm sure freaked people out. And so everybody who was white or whatever in this area just wanted these black soldiers the hell out of there.
So you've got a bunch of racist American soldiers.
Sure.
And the objects of their racism, the victims, let's say that, of their racism, heading to Cuba, a place which has a very multiracial population.
Exactly.
And that is fighting a civil war, a revolutionary war, in part to end slavery and to end white rule, foreign white rule in the country. With you've had African Cuban men as leaders of their armed forces, not black guys with white commanders, but white guys with a black commander in Cuba.
Yeah.
And so you're going to see a clash of cultures when the Americans get there. But as we'll see in the next episode, there were also leaders of the Cuban Revolution that were also thinking about making sure that when the revolution was over, it was white guys that ended up running things. But we'll get to that next time.